All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 3 of Refuge in Practice. Today's guest is Matt McCaughan of Bon Iver and Rosebuds and his Golden Messenger and Porta Static and Lamb Chop and I don't know. We're gonna go down a list. I can't even keep it straight. He's played with a lot of people. He has a lot of knowledge. I hope that you are taking some time out of your day to focus on something positive. And again, I hope everyone's healthy and hanging in there. But let's get started. Let's bring on Matt.
Hey, Jason.
What's up? How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. I am doing everything but drumming these days.
Yep. Yep. Sounds right.
Yeah, right. Here, I'm dedicating this to practicing refuge and practice, talking about practicing. We're talking about stuff from, tour and making records, but really all I did today was plant a bunch of vegetables in a garden for the first time and go for a run in the woods. That's about it. It's the first time I picked up sticks was maybe a half hour ago when you and I first started talking.
Awesome. Sounds like a good day, though. Sounds
Yeah,
great.
right. We got to fill our days with whatever activities make us positive. Um, Look, I want to get into some stuff though. Because I haven't played a lot today. I want to do a little bit of pad work. I want to talk about practice pads and warming up and the things we do pre-show. Sometimes the crazy things we do post-show if we're
Sure.
not satisfied with our performance.
Uh
The things we do in hotel rooms. Well, we won't talk about that necessarily. um, so, you know, I understand you did a little bit of marching, right? Or did you play in some drumline or something like that? Or
yeah, I did kind of uh, the normal school route where I took private lessons and did all the school bands, um, including marching band, and through high school, and then in college I marched also. I never did drum corps, but um,
you marched? Was that fun or did that suck? I mean, because I remember those drums being heavy. The uniforms were like wool. I had this giant hat with a big feathered plume that was falling over my face all the time.
yep, that's very accurate. But it was great. I loved it. Yeah, it was awesome.
It's good for chops. Did you have to like play with giant drumsticks too?
Yes, our instructor was Matt Savage, who I don't know if you're familiar with his name, but he was sort of is
He
a
was a
drum,
savage.
yeah, drum corps name, and he was our drumline instructor, and we used his sticks. He had sticks with Vic Firth, so, but yes,
Did
they were the baseball bat, Hartman-esque.
did they also tape them the school colors? Were they like? Did they have extra weight?
White, just white,
Oh man.
extra anti grip.
Right, slipping out of your hands. I actually practiced. I brought these out, I think, last episode with the Vic Firth Ralphie Jr. Ralph Hardiman stick, who's also another drum corps guy. So I've often wondered, like, is it beneficial to play with heavier sticks? Because they're the furthest thing from drum set sticks, of course. So my theory is if you can warm up your wrists a little bit with them, then that's not a big deal. If you play with them all the time, it might be a little misleading for the kind of dynamics and finesse you want to get on drum set. What's your take?
Uh, I agree totally. I think that if you they're good for, like you're saying, for just warm ups and just to sort of, like when a batter walks up and he's got the donut on the end of the bat, to give extra weight and then just to
Hmm.
sort of get your wrist moving. But I think that if you were to sort of focus on them, I don't think I would not benefit from going, like you're saying, going back and forth. I would either sort of like dedicate, okay, the next couple months I'm not playing any shows, so I'm going to just kind of do marching stuff to sort of build up, because it'll help build up the muscles that
For
then
sure.
will come in handy when you go to smaller sticks.
Quick timeout since we're
Yeah,
talking about big sticks and more volume. There's been a request I've just noticed for you to talk a little bit louder. So all
oh
I
sure,
would say is
I can just
lean.
get closer.
There you go. Lean into your mic and people can hear all those ghost notes.
Sure.
uh, Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, as Matt was saying, if you didn't catch any of that, if I happen to be a little louder, it is a good thing. We both agree that playing with a little bit bigger sticks in terms of warming up, as long as you don't overdo it and overtax your muscles, can help you get up to speed. Which for Matt and I both, I know that we're when we're home, sometimes we have different roles. Well, for sure, we have different roles when we're on the road. We're taking care of kids or like taking care of our families in general, and we don't have the hours to clock in and pad it as often or play drums. And so when you get ready to go on tour again, sometimes you're like sucking wind because you haven't quite gotten your muscles up to speed before tour. So
Exactly.
that's where these things, a little bit bigger sticks, do come in handy. Quick comment. I had a conversation with Jojo Mayer. You know who Jojo is?
Yep.
Not that long ago, and I saw a show, and it blew my mind. It was amazing. But I was talking to him afterwards, and he was like, I was kind of gassed. I just flew in, and I haven't played in about 6 weeks. And I was like, what? How is that possible? It didn't seem that way. And he said, well, it's there. He said, the only problem is it's just not calibrated. And I never thought about that, like calibration, the right amount of push, the right amount of pull, the right amount
Sure.
of effort, the right amount of relaxation. So,
Hand to hand.
yep, hand to hand. Dude, can we segue? Can we talk about hand to hand?
Absolutely.
We're gonna I'm gonna get on Scott McPherson for this little tackle. What do they call it? Coffee practice pad, coffee table practice
Coffee
pad.
table one.
You have the same one. We just learned this. I've been trying to get him to make a 10-inch for a long time because it's a great little pad. Otherwise, I use this reflex pad, which is great. Also very socially acceptable, super quiet backstage. You have the same thing. Do you have the same color as me?
What is this is
That's
this is the purple, I think.
purple.
Hard
OG
to
is
tell in this
black.
orange light.
Anyway, these are both good pads. Anyway, hand to hand, the kind of things that I work on, and I'm assuming you did some of the same stuff in drum corps. I remember in middle school that I got really excited when I learned how to play accents. Like when I was able to create a bit of a pulse instead of create a melody within the rudiment. So something I've done a lot with my students over the past that became challenging to me early on was whatever you play with the right hand, play with the left hand. So I want to do a little game, a little challenge, put you on the spot here. I'm going to try not to make you lose your gig. If anyone else is watching, especially Sean Carey, he might be like, dude, it is, yeah, right. What gig? That's a whole nother conversation. We don't have gigs, everybody. If you need a couple drummers, we're available. All right. So I'm going to play a phrase and I want you to play it. All right. And this is going to start with right hand lead. So you're just going to use your ears. I'm going to give you a quick count in. Okay. This is what I'm going to play. And then you copy me. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Is that right?
Not quite right, but that's totally okay. You're going to do the same thing to me.
Wrong, but
you're going to do the same thing to me. Okay, so wait, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Quick footnote here, sidebar. Do you ever suffer from performance anxiety?
No. Not
well, then you shouldn't have got that wrong, man.
I know.
It could have just been.
I do suffer from ADD, so.
Yeah, well, I do too. That's a special thing to have if you're into indie rock. That's part of it, Look, I'm going to give it to you one more time, and then you give it a shot, and then you're going to give me a phrase to copy, okay?
Okay.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to play it again. Got it?
Okay. Yeah, I totally missed that it was triplet. So when you started counting it off, I was hearing it all as straight. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Perfect. Let's do the same thing, left hand lead.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
Just you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
This is why you're a pro. You could just do that. It's amazing. Okay, next challenge with it. And you're going to do this to me too. I hope that I fall on my face for you because I'm a forever student. You're going to do the same exercise. You're going to start with the right lead, but I want to hear it as flams. So it would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Some people said they can't quite hear that, but you know what?
I could do it on the drum.
Turn it up. You could do it on the drum. Let's evolve it to the drum. How about that?
Great.
You give now, but before you do that, wait. You got to give me one. We're gonna try and put these two things together so it's a longer phrase.
Okay. Do you want me to keep in the same vein?
It could be in the same vein, or you could do some crazy trick that I can't play, and this episode is over.
Let's see. My problem is I'll probably try something and also not be able to do it.
Always leave headroom, my friend.
So it's going to be the next phrase after this.
Okay.
So I'll actually play yours and then add on to it.
You know what? Why don't you go ahead and move it to the drum? Too many people are complaining. I can't handle complaints about levels with this live stream, folks. This is hard. We're doing it on the fly. Here's what mine's going to sound like on the snare drum only. Okay, what's your phrase going to be?
I'm going to add on to yours, right? Okay.
Whoa, so. How's it go?
I keep forgetting yours. Yep.
Do you always come up with stuff that's complicated?
No, I try not to, but it sometimes happens.
Let me give it one more shot here. Is that right?
That was yours, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And what's your pattern?
Let's see. I have to play yours to do it. But the sticking is wrong. See, I made it too complicated for myself.
Okay, we're gonna bail right there because this is a very interesting thing to talk about. This is practice.
Yep.
This is what you do when you run out of ideas or when you're bored with your normal gig. So now I want to talk about Holocene, and I want you to play the drum part from Holocene because it sounds like you and Sean are doing two separate things, right? And there's an echo type delay or a pattern. Is that correct?
They do fit together, yes.
They fit together. So what would your part be for Holocene?
Let's see. So it's sort of. That's basically that.
That sounds killer.
It might be super slow, actually.
No, you know what? Here's why that doesn't matter. What you just played is something you have played how many hundreds of times?
Yeah.
Probably not thousands yet because that record's not that old. But I just wanted to point out to people that there's a big difference for us as drummers when we play things that we know well that we've rehearsed, that we've written, versus something that we can't do. But both Matt and I mean, I'm constantly working on things that I can't do, and the difference between practicing and playing is doing things that you can't do. So, uh,
It's also super weird. I'm realizing because I've never played. I don't remember the last time I played that song except for in the studio when it wasn't with the band or in a rehearsal. And I just realized I've never played that at home before. Uh, it's
that's funny.
super strange.
No, I mean, yeah, it's out of context, right?
Uh,
I've done a handful of like, larger clinics in front of roomfuls of drummers, and it's always terrifying because I don't have my band, because I'm not in the setting of like the stage and the, you know
yeah,
what
it's
should be what should be my normal comfort and wheelhouse. um I want to talk a little bit more about the different gigs you've had. What was your first band?
my first band was um, a band that I had in middle school with some friends.
That
Um,
far back?
yeah, uh,
Wow.
and it was a band called first. The first name we had was UXB, which was uh, short for unexploded bomb, and then that band sort of turned into the Stickmen, which was sort of my band throughout high school.
And what was the first band? Did you is your brother older than you, Mac?
Yeah. Yes.
And did he have a record label, Murs Records, prior to you uh, becoming a professional musician?
Um, Merge started. No, he didn't. But he was putting stuff out. But Merge started. I guess that was probably. It was '89, and so that was 3 or 4 years after. It was right around when I started playing, actually.
Was Superchunk a like a competitive thing to you, or was it like just pure inspiration?
Oh no, it was not competitive. It was it was more him showing me that it could be done.
Right? I didn't
Um,
have any siblings to show me anything could be done. I only had Seattle, about 100 miles away from where I grew up, and I was just paying attention to the bands there, and they made it seem like it was possible to make music for a living in the early '90s. So that
right.
was my that was my opportunity to follow. Um, so, in all the gigs you've had, is there one that, I mean, obviously you're very successful with Bon Iver, but is there another of your gigs that holds a special spot in your heart, like something that you would want people to go to listen to the music or the catalog that really, you know, that you're proud of?
Um, I mean, it's sort of a cop out answer, but all of it, it's sort of, trying to pick your favorite. There's none, they all sort of were part of my, I guess, growth and development as a musician and part of my past, part of my life. And so it would be to pick one over the other would be, not that you're asking me to do that necessarily, but it would sort of be like, oh, well, these 2 years were better than these 4 years. And,
Sure.
I guess part of that is I'm fortunate in that I've always been in bands that I have enjoyed um, from the beginning, or I've joined a band that I already enjoyed listening to, or so it's really difficult to answer that question. Uh,
That's okay. You don't need to pick favorites. Well, let me ask you this then: of those bands, like we become different players as time goes on, right? Music resonates with us differently. We sometimes want to play more. We sometimes want to play less. Often that is the band that we're in. Sometimes it's just a level of maturity. So I'm going to give you an example of where I started one of my bands, which makes no sense to anyone who wants to dance ever, but it was sort of like a breeding ground for, or an embryo from from where I wound up. So
sure.
I was always trying to take really complicated exercises, basically like independence exercises, and use them as beats for songs.
Oh
So,
yeah.
like, here's one example of that, and this is my proggy background, I'm sure, but I would take a paradiddle. Actually, what would you call it? we need a rudimental guy. Maybe you know what this is. Oh, I would call it an end-a-diddle. So instead of right, left, right, left, left, it was right, left, right, left, right. So the diddle was at the end. So it sounded like this between the hat and the snare. At the time I was playing matched. And I would accent the second of those doubles, so it would be like the downbeat or the quarter note, right? And then I would play a dotted eighth of the bass drum. And then that wasn't enough. And again, we've already lost all the dancers or anyone that like wants
Sure.
to. But again, this is what you have to go through as a drummer. You need to you need to go through the thinning out process of what actually makes sense, especially if you want to meet anyone that writes a song that's going to resonate with the world.
Right.
So then I evolved it from that to this. Ah. Terrible dotted eighth pattern. That was like my idea of like, oh, this is a cool beat for a song. Oh. I can't even play it anymore. That's how important it was that I can't even play it anymore. So, do you have anything that that happened in the past as a drummer that was like a bit of a wild goose chase in terms of like, this is fun for me right now in my life, but like has no relevance now or today?
Yeah. I can't. So one of my, well, I did that all the time. And I was also way into prog, and so I was always trying to make it complicated. Um, and I can still remember one of the beats from my second group, the Stickmen, um, and the song was called Salamander Rock. It was the instrumental.
Of course it was.
And it was, I think it, I'm not sure what made me, I think maybe a Steve Gadd thing is where I got it from, but it's just, 16th notes between the hat and the cymbal offbeats. So it was based on this basically. But I had to, again, like you're saying, sort of complicate it, and then and so it ended up like this. Gosh, it's been a while.
Yeah, you just lost your gig.
Yep.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I remember I had to learn several Steve Gadd grooves for a Paul Simon review that I did. I had to learn 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. I had to learn Late in the Evening. Did you ever have to do that one?
I didn't have to, but I did.
You did? You had the whole. So weird, but that was the stuff like that kind of birthed the idea of chasing drums, like pursuing what it was that happened back here. And
Yeah.
look where we're at today.
Sure. Yeah.
That's all that happened. But yeah, now we just got our gig back. Now that we agreed that that's the way to play. So over the course of your career, what was important to you? I mean, we talked about early beginnings and prog beats. Like, um, what do you work on? What did you work on early on? What did you work on, say, 10 years into playing? And what do you work on today? Like, I know that you have a lot of instruments that people can't see in the frame, that you play modular synths and you play keys. And I mean, there's a lot that interests you besides the sticks in your hands and the drums. And is that also, is that because you feel like you've covered enough ground with drums that it's no longer your main source of inspiration. But like I said, go back to the beginning of like what was important as a musician early on versus midway through your career versus now.
Early on, it was sort of being able to trying to be able to play what I heard on recordings, play like the guys, or girls on those recordings, and um, and so that sort of was the first, thing I was reaching for, and then I started to realize, oh, a lot you can, that I could play some of the things, no matter how, if it was like, oh, I can play a simple beat, that's awesome, and then, well, what about this beat that sounds really difficult, and then you work on it, and maybe years later, maybe the next week, you get it. And so a lot of early on, it was sort of going through the stuff that I was into and realizing that they're also drummers, and they had to learn how to play it, and sort of some stuff was, you know well beyond, being able to reach at the time, and some stuff was approachable, but I was fascinated by what, when I first started, just there was this wall between the listener and the player. Like, that's something that I can't do, they can do it, I can't do it, and I won't, that's they're on a big record, so that's way down the line. And then the more you start to break it down and sort of, demystify it, it's like, oh, that's just this beat that I just played in my garage. And they just, and not to discredit anybody that I was listening to, but that sort of is what I was chasing, is like trying to absorb as much as possible. And, a lot of it was fancy stuff, or, like I said, I was way into Prague. And so trying to make it complicated. And that sort of went along with the rudimental aspect of the stuff I was into. Um,
Right.
with hands, and sort of applying that to drum set. And then and then after that, I went down a jazz rabbit hole for a while. I don't know
Did
if
you have a favorite jazz drummer you listen to a lot?
um all the normal ones. I actually, my favorite jazz musicians were never or usually wasn't the drummer. It was like Thelonious Monk is maybe my favorite, but he's kind of a drummer. um and then, Miles Davis, um Coltrane, but they also had crazy bands. Tony Williams
Oh yeah, and I mean you're
in
talking
Leather
about an
Suit.
era that was fearless, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so that's that those types of that type of playing and those musicians is sort of what I was way into and trying to emulate and learn. And so that brings on a new vocabulary, and different touch and different everything.
I remember when I was playing a lot of jazz, um, I hit that wall of like, how are those guys playing such a burning ride pattern? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on? Like, how is that? Because I was still a kid and like trying to do everything with my wrist. I didn't realize that there was such a thing as rebound,
Uh-huh.
like letting the stick do the work. And um, as a kid, I attended a jazz festival and Jeff Hamilton was there,
Mm-hmm.
and he was very kind, and after the show like actually had a cymbal, like he'd broken down backstage. I think I was over the high school band, but he actually showed me the whole like the idea of letting the stick do the work
Sure.
and then slowly sped it up. And that whole thing all of a sudden was like, how, what? And the fact that he was looking so relaxed and playing, that like sent me down the path of like, oh, I guess there's this thing called technique, and there's like letting the sticks do the work for you. And
Sure.
I mean, that is still to this day my pursuits. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
So you
no.
you were at Prague and listening to the guys on records and learning that vocabulary, and then you went down a jazz rabbit hole,
Mm-hmm.
which people still go on, especially discovering music from 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. Then what happened? Like, you went through jazz. Did you ever want to be a jazz drummer?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know that it was ever my main focus, but it's sort of what I thought that I would be doing as far as income. It's like, well, you can just kind of show up to a gig and you don't have to rehearse, and so it's kind of a myth, but it's also true as far as just earning the money part. And I was like, well, that's I get that's making a living playing drums, and that's sort of what I was always after, um, being able to do this. And so, but then around 96 or 97, Mac was working on a portastatic record, and it had more piano and maybe more. It's not a jazz record, but it had he maybe more. He could see a place for me to play drums on it, and so um, I played with him on that, and then sort of switched over. I'd always been interested in indie rock and stuff, but being in school and also doing jazz gigs, it just you know never I never really pursued that. But then started playing with him more and more, and going those were kind of my first van tours and stuff like that. And that was
Amazing.
such a welcome change from the jazz and
Right.
the headiness that had been pretty much everything before that. Not that there isn't thought put into it, but it's just a totally different mindset, and it's a different type of concentration.
It's very true. I mean, I wish I could be a jazz drummer, but I don't have any illusions about how hard that is, how much study it takes, how you need to live and breathe the music. There are some great jazz drummers still to this day. I respect the hell out of Brian Blade is one of those. Mark
Yeah.
Juliana is one of those. But so when did you start like touring, like casting off? Like, all right, I guess I'm a professional drummer. I'm on the road now.
Um, that well, I mean, I so 97 was my first out of state show for the CMJ,
Hmm.
the Merge
I remember
Showcase.
that. Was
Uh,
that in New York?
yep, it was at the West
Was
Beth
that
Theater.
was that during the crazy hurricane year?
Oh gosh, I
Do you
don't
remember
know.
that?
Maybe I do remember that, but I don't remember. I don't think this was that. I remember I borrowed my dad's '88 Crown Vic, which is a perfect
Yes.
city car, and first time driving in the city, and just within 20 seconds of being there, it was all the honked at, all the wrong way down a one way, just in a huge car. Um, but yeah, we played at the West Beth, and it was Portastatic and Lamb Chop and Neutral Milk Hotel, and it was just an insane time. It was great. And so I would do tours that were like weekends or maybe a week, but I had a job at the Tinderbox,
Hmm.
slinging cigars,
Yeah.
and then I worked
Nice.
at kind of went the other way and worked at Duke Hospital as a runner. But then I guess around 2005 is when it was like, all right, I keep having to like leave my job to go do a tour. And then I forget what it was, but there was a few things that were coming up, and it was like, all right, I think you sort of have to take a leap at some point.
Yeah. Right.
Then because then you'll never look for more stuff if you always have a job to come back to. But
Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, more than ever these days, it is a bigger leap.
yep,
Obviously, like
yep,
it is really hard. No one should have any illusions about what it takes to be a musician on the road and the amount of sacrifice it takes. And obviously, if you have a family at home, there's even more to think about and consider. Um, we might. Would you be on the road right now?
probably. We had
I
two
mean, did you have to cancel? Was there shows that
we
were
had two
canceled?
two tours, and this I think this would be I don't remember if this would be in between, but uh, I think this would be the Europe one, that
Yeah.
I would be at.
And I have loved every show that I've seen.
Oh, thanks.
Uh, were we in Manila when was it you or Sean that was sick as a dog that was like barfing before
Um,
or after the show? It was Sean, right?
it was Sean, and he was a total trooper,
Yeah, I couldn't
because
tell. Show was amazing. I didn't realize you had another sick drummer on
he
stage.
he had a moment exactly during, I think it was Creeks, during a song that or Stacks or something, where and so nobody on stage knew except for me because I saw him duck out when he usually doesn't, and he was back in time for the next song. Total pro.
Man, it was probably creeks because that guy most of the time would rather be fishing, right? Fly fishing somewhere, and so
Yeah,
he
he
was
fishes off
sick. He
the
was
back of the
homesick,
Minnesota.
and he was like, ugh.
Right.
Um, Man, can we talk about tour briefly? Because so many people are missing it and or don't get to go everywhere we get to go.
Yeah.
You sent me a photo not that long ago of an owl on your shoulder and or on your forearm, and I knew exactly where you were.
Mm-hmm.
How many people can say that oh yeah, he's at the Owl Cafe in Tokyo in actually Shibuya? Like,
Right. Right.
I mean, there are so many memories that we could talk about that keep us, laughing and smiling when we're not on the road. I remember how crazy it was leaving that show in Manila, where I mean, it was like there was no lines on the road. People, it was just like, you remember that? Like trying to
Yeah.
get out, like traffic was just every which way, and there was kids in the street. It was 1 in the morning, and like they were pushing shopping carts, and there was shanties everywhere, and
Yeah, and it wasn't even I mean, we were at an event, but the traffic wasn't due to anything. It was
no,
just
it was insane.
insane the whole time.
Um, and then let's fast forward the last on the I tour. I saw you guys in Portland, the Rose Garden, and you had the show with the mirrors and lights. I think it was the first show with the mirrors, Michael Brown design, and
Oh yeah.
the show. I mean, it was so spiritual. It was like took both my wife and I to another place. You sounded like so perfect, like you couldn't have sounded better yet. There was still this danger. I felt
Uh-huh.
like everyone was like super hyper focused because it was the
Yeah.
first show with the mirrors, and like, I mean, I want to ask you, like, the reason you're in a successful band is just clearly everybody puts in the time, just as you put in the time as a drummer to, put together your hands and your independence and your feel. But you're in a band where everyone clearly shows up prepared, and you've taken a lot of time to consider both the production of the show and how you're playing. But I mean, is that across the board's work ethic? Like, is that just something you all decided a long time ago?
Um, well, I don't know that it was decided so much as it was sort of having putting the right people around you and building sort of building a family and doing it in such a way that you you always try and obviously look for people who are very talented at their job, but m- almost more, if not more important, is someone that you want to be around and someone that is easy to be around, or even if they're not a social person, if that's fine with them and everybody else. And that's always been one of the things that whenever someone asks me, like on Instagram or something like that, like, hey, not what's your secret, but what do I need to know? I would, I want to do this too, and what's something you've learned? And that's the always the first thing I tell them is just be easy to be around. Be cool in the van. Because you're around these people
Be
all the
cool in the
time.
van.
And if
That's
you,
a good tour shirt right there.
yeah,
That is very true. I mean, I'm learning that I need to be cool around my family right now, because we're in a van. It happens to be in the shape of a house, but like, all those long drives, they're happening to everybody who's choosing to stay
yeah.
home right now.
Another bathroom stop. All right. Okay.
No number two on the bus.
Yep.
All right, enough inside tour jokes. What when you do have time to sit down and practice, um, what are you working on? Like I'm for me, I'm spending a lot of time recording just ideas, cataloging as much as I can right now. I mean, there's still things that I'm doing to exercise my hands and my feet, but what are you working on?
So unfortunately, I haven't been able to, or not been able to, but I haven't been practicing that much recently. But so so usually when I'm practicing, it's because something's coming up, or maybe I want to try something like a different piece of gear or change the like, oh, what does this snare do? And I change the tuning. But when I do sit down to play, I usually do some just kind of some timekeeping, just a simple beat, and then see where that goes. And then I'll usually work on my hands a little bit and maybe kind of getting around. Um, but mostly both backstage and at home, I've just kind of been working on getting my hands to match each other and comfortable and loosening up a little bit and doing a little more. molar-esque type things, but not necessarily going whole hog molar.
And for anyone that's watching that doesn't know what Matt is talking about, molar is something that we use. I talked about it in the first episode of Refuge in Practice with Tyler Williams. It's molar is a system of up and down stroking, and whatever you do with the right hand, you should be doing with the left. But it's not just up and down stroking. There's also, it's a good place to show it, maybe right here. There's also down, tap, up, down, tap, up, down, tap, up, down, tap, up, groups of 4. And that motion, that economy of motion, is something we use to give the hi-hat a certain feel or pull out accents in our playing. And it's there are several videos you can find online about molar. The gentleman Sanford Moeller is the guy that developed the system. Jim Chapin is another guy that's really great about, you know, systemizing that thing. A lot of players out there are doing it, but I'm with you.
And so I use it mostly on the hat, and so I'm trying to get my left hand, like you were saying, also
All
up.
right.
But with hiss, Mike likes a lot of 16th note, and so I just like the way one hand sounds better on the hat than two hands.
Oh yeah, totally.
Because
So
it's a
what
little.
would be, give me an example of the most up-tempo molar method for Hiss Golden Messenger? Killer. That's a great groove. Yeah, and that gets tiring unless you're doing it right.
Unless you're doing that, yeah.
Yeah, unless you're doing the molar method. There's no way you could do that.
And so then within that, I've been working on moving it to different fingers to sort of give, so it's not all just everything, so going from like the first finger to second finger, third finger.
You're a nerd.
Yeah.
You're
And so
no,
backstage, that's what I'm doing.
no.
between the
How long
hands.
have you been playing drums?
Since '88. I don't do the math. I just tell you the year.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's 42 years. No, 32 years. Right?
Sure.
30, 42 years.
Sure.
Crazy. Sure. I don't know. I'm not doing the math.
Wait, no, it can't be 42 years.
32 years.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm 45.
Yeah. 32. Same thing. All right. You know what? That is all super valuable stuff to work on. If you guys want to ask Matt those kind of questions, you can certainly reach out to him on Instagram. I want to get to some of these questions that I'm seeing that are popping up before we run out of time here. I'm going to answer one that's actually dedicated to me, which is, you can see questions as well, right, Matt?
Yep, now I can.
Okay, great. Someone asked, Jeremy Peterson asked, what is the technique for making it sound almost backwards / circular, like on Your Hurricane, which is a Death Cab song from the last record? I think what that refers to is I do a really quick, tight roll and an open hi-hat before the downbeat. And I believe, and I think this is what you're talking about. So it's just a really quick, super tight press, closed roll into a downbeat. So it's meant to sound like it sucks back into place. Matt, favorite Hiss and Bon Iver songs to play?
Let's see. Hiss. Well, it's actually another kind of push-pulley one. Well, I guess there's a couple songs that I do it on, but so I'll say it's a feel that I do with Hiss, but it's more of a shuffle, like Happy Birthday. It's kind of a with an upbeat. that one, or there's another upbeat one with his that I like a lot, Biloxi, uh, and that's and then with Bon, um, let's see, uh, 666 is always fun. Naeem is really fun. Those are ones I kind of get to sort of go nuts on a little bit, and then um, Minnesota is one where I get to kind of nerd out a little bit. That's the one
Oh
that I
yeah,
do traditional on.
fantastic track.
And I don't know, the live version's way different than the album version. And I do a groove that's kind of based on something I did like in college jazz band on some Arturo Sandoval song. But
Oh
it's
man,
definitely not.
you're going deep. You're
It's
talking
definitely
about
not the same beat, but
muso stuff right there. There's only so many of us in Death Cab that can have muso conversations, and then the other half of the band is like always talking about RAM.
right,
It's just keeping it in the songwriter's vein, and then every now and then someone sneaks on a jazz or a prog record. But everyone's listening. Everyone is tuned in and checking it out. There's a deep dub love as well. So there's a lot of
awesome.
dub and reggae that we listen to when we're on the road. Um, how do you come up with Bon Iver drum parts by yourself, and how often do other band members have more input? So yeah, that's a question I have for you too. Are you and Sean constantly tooling stuff out together? Do you send ideas back and forth, or is it?
So a lot of the Bond stuff is written in the studio and from fragments that are then sort of generally, this is generally the way it goes, fragments that usually a lot of stuff is put onto
Mhm.
maybe a demo or something, and then as we go through Wisconsin, or Sean will go over there living there, and or on the road we'll come up with parts, or Justin or somebody will say, hey, this would sound good here. And so it's not like there's a writing session when we all get together and then come up with parts. And so usually the parts evolve as the recording process goes on. And then um and then so the part where Sean and I split the parts up is usually just what's feasible live, with him also doing a lot of piano, and just the sound of our drums are different and the cymbals we use, so what would sound better on this drum set versus that drum set,
Yeah, I've
regardless
noticed
of
that
who's playing it.
you definitely have two very different sounding kits, but in a very complementary way.
Yeah, and so thank you. Um, and so when we split it up a lot, sometimes it'll be where I am doing, who knows who played it on the record. It doesn't matter. This
Right.
part has to be played, and maybe there's a million drums. It's like, well, we can't do all that. What's the essence of this part, and what would be ideal, and what's possible, And usually we come up with a lot of times it'll be maybe some part of what we played, but there's definitely things where I'm playing a part that Justin played, or
It's a perfect segue. Uh, Another question for me is, how does the beat for Kath go? And I can't remember if I play that in another episode or not, but um, the embryo of Kath actually was a Ben Gibbard idea. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I embellished, but Ben is a great drummer, and he usually comes up with like a 2 bar phrase or something that he loops, and it uses it as a writing tool.
Uh-huh.
But it was so long ago that demo, I'd have to go listen to it again, that happened, and you probably can attest to this. Sometimes you get years down the road and you're like, how did that start again? Because the song just evolves, right?
Right.
But I'll play that since somebody asked. Sounds like this. Basically, it's just back and forth between those 2 parts, and there's a there's a bridge section as well, but it's again a testament to like if you've been paying attention to this episode from the beginning, I played a bunch of shit that made no sense from some prog band that somebody named in the thread here. Dig deep enough, you can find it. Uh, but it's the parts that we arrive at. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're what serves the song best, and it doesn't matter who writes them, where they come from, and it to me the goal at the end of the day is how can we all make songs that resonate with the most people,
Yeah.
and at the same time we need to have fulfilling parts as players, but it's not just about technique, and to we're gonna have to wrap up here soon, but to circle back around to one other question, Matt was talking about Moeller method, the up and the downstroking, also with the shuffle. But someone asked about the question, and this is super nerdy for you to even ask, but the difference between Moeller method and push pull. And do you use any of that, Matt?
I don't know. I mean, I know there is a difference. I don't use it because it's molar or push pull. I guess it's push pull that I'm doing, but it's kind of I don't know.
Push
But it's
pull
just
push
drop.
pull is more inside the hand, like this.
Yeah. So
You do it, you got it. But that is, I mean, it works if you're keeping time, like for a Latin beat.
yeah, absolutely.
And it works on shorter runs. But it has to be time and place. And for drummers like Matt and I that are usually on larger stages in big rooms, a lot of that technique, it's great for developing hand, speed, but it's not always applicable other than a cool trick for a music store. So I
Right.
work on it. I use it in groups of two and groups of three.
Yeah.
But if you're a drummer out there trying to find out what's going to work best for that group of people you have yet to meet that you want to spend a lot of time in a van with, I wouldn't worry so much about working on push pull stuff. By the way, yours looks great, Matt.
Oh, thanks.
Um, I would just worry about, again, like we've already mentioned, what's going to work best for the song, and being open to what people's ideas are if what you're playing isn't really working and someone else has a better idea. Like you should never be so egotistical that you would not want to take suggestions from your bandmates, specifically your bandmates.
Yeah. Well, and learning all the learning anything really is, like they say, learning a language. And then if you go down a rabbit hole that's like a really specific technique, it's the type of thing where it's kind of like learning maybe another, like learning another language within it, or maybe a different dialect, where it's great to know, but you're not going to use that other language all the time when you're speaking with other people. It's just like it's really handy to know, and it's useful, but you can't n- not learning it shouldn't mean that you're stifled in any way,
Of course.
if that makes sense.
No, it does to me. Do you have any other advice that you would like to give anybody who's at home, maybe sitting on the fence about what to do with their time, whether to be making music, whether to be? I mean, for me, I'm always just telling people you just need to stay positive, and if
Yeah, do
if
do
that
what you feel like doing.
yeah, I agree 100%. And if I sat down and played the drums before I planted a garden today, I would not have had any inspiration. I probably would have crapped out and been tired and like didn't want to, and would have maybe just not spent any real time playing drums. That being said, I found something to do that inspired me, which I took that inspiration back to the kit, and it made all the difference in the world. So,
Hmm.
whatever you need to do, I think whatever people need to do. Th-
One thing that I've been doing a lot that's sort of easy to, and this also with like pre-show warm up, that's easy to kind of not kind of to make yourself do, for lack of a better term, is I've been playing along with songs that don't have drums, but they're not play alongs. Um, you know, like so it's just like a solo piano, or
that's
um,
great. Brad Meldau ever?
sometimes, yeah.
Ah, so phrasing is so
I
great.
just sort of like look around, and so I'll think like I'll just like that I'll think of a name like, oh, he does a lot of solo stuff. What does he have?
Phrasing, yeah, phrasing and melody
Phrasing.
and all that stuff is great.
Yeah.
I remember putting on a Branford Marsalis record, Crazy People Music. Do you remember that one from your jazz days?
Not
You
by
were
that
you
title.
were you were you were stuck in the '60s still,
Yeah.
maybe. But I remember putting on a record that had a lot of meaning to me when I was younger, and I didn't remember all of the drum parts, but I remember the sax solos. I
Uh-huh.
remember the phrasing and the melody
Yep.
of everyone else's instrument. So I think that's a really valid point, that playing along to things that aren't necessarily other people's drum beats is a really great way to
Yeah.
learn more about music.
James Booker is one of my favorite wells for that specific purpose.
Do you have something queued up? I totally forgot
I
about
did.
that. Like, you want to play a little clip or an example of like what you might listen to
Yeah.
warm up for a
Well,
show?
so we're fortunate on tour that we sometimes travel with a little studio that has a drum set in it as part of it. And so this, I always pretty much start all my warm up sessions with this song. Let's see if we can hear it. Oh, I gotta unmute it first. Can you hear that? And so with this one, either I'll do like straight New Orleansy type second feel, or just a you know swanky backbeat thing. Or and just kind of
It-
mess around.
That is awesome. That is amazing.
He's
And
got such great feel. It's so easy to play with him.
well, and to watch you do that, to see like the physical reaction, like the way that your whole body is playing the drums, like
Hmm.
you're really in the music. And I've noticed the same thing when I see you play live, no matter who you're playing with. And you know what? I think that's probably a good place to end it. I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in again and watching and listening to Matt and me ramble on. I hope that you are taking some of these ideas and putting them into your own practice. And I hope that Matt, you continue to practice, because I know you hadn't been much lately.
Yeah, I need to
But
practice my flam accent.
it does, yeah. What? Yeah, it's important. Each episode, I try to fall on my face a little bit. So we did just that, and I'm proud of it. Totally fine with being a learner. Anyway, thank you everybody again for tuning in. I'm sorry we didn't get to more of your questions, but I'm a big fan, and I hope to talk to you and see you again soon. Matt, stay in touch, buddy.
Oh man, thanks so much for having me. This was great.
All
It's a
right.
good kick in the butt.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for tuning in to Refuge in Practice.
Thank you, everybody.